This is the story of a tragedy within a tragedy. Within days of the December 7, 1941 Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Washington ordered a hasty investigation that blamed the attack on just two men. These men were the Army and Navy commanders in Hawaii, General Walter Short and Admiral Husband Kimmel. Humiliated, ridiculed, and demoted, these two men shouldered the pain of an entire nation. But over 7 decades, the real story has emerged. The truth has led military men, Pearl Harbor survivors, and even the United States Congress to fight for the restoration of Short and Kimmel's rank. This is the truth of Pearl Harbor. These are the facts of a real tragedy. This is the story of Admiral Kimmel. Magic. This was the name of America's top secret project to decode and read Japanese diplomatic and spy messages. These messages strongly indicated that an attack on Pearl Harbor was coming and were being secretly read in Washington. Admiral Kimmel testified that had he known of the information in these magic messages, he would have taken the fleet to sea to intercept the Japanese strike force. Vice Admiral David Richardson is former commander of the 6th Fleet and Deputy Commander of the Pacific Fleet.
When I first joined the fleet in April of 1940, we then had a substantial presence in Hawaii, a presence that Admiral J.O. Richardson objected to because there had been too many examples in fleet exercises of the ability of a hostile force to conduct a surprise attack. Because he was insistent that the fleet be moved back to the coast, which made so much sense for training purposes since we were expanding at that time, as well as for general security. But he was fired because that wasn't what the president wanted to do. To make that situation even worse, and I was there at the time, an aircraft carrier, the Yorktown, and 3 battleships were transferred from the West Coast to the East Coast. And so that left an even smaller force available in Pearl Harbor for Admiral Kimmel. It's so interesting, though, in this case, that here the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet was not deemed to have a need to know, but the British in London were. The equipment that we were using to decode the Japanese codes was also provided to London. They had a need to know, but in Washington's idea, Admiral Kimmel in Pearl Harbor did not have that need. Washington's concept of maintaining the security of our code-breaking capabilities was a very strange thing. It was deemed by those involved in that program as being their very private property, apparently, because the people who really needed the information they were getting, they were not willing to provide it to them. The code-breaking itself, they deemed, was so sensitive that the operational consequences were secondary. Admiral Kimmel had heard a rumor that Washington was successfully breaking Japanese codes and could foretell Japanese actions. He requested that he be kept informed regarding that, and he was assured that he would be kept informed, but the fact is he was not. He was excluded from any knowledge at all of what we then were learning from breaking of Japanese codes. How tragic that the man most in need, the only one who could initiate actions to alleviate the adverse impacts from surprise, was Admiral Kimmel. He alone was able to initiate action to defend his ships. Now, if Washington, for whatever reason, felt that he should not be so informed, then it was totally incumbent on them to take charge of initiating, ordering whatever actions needed to be taken. In other words, they would simply bypass Admiral Kimmel. They didn't do that. The only sensible thing that Admiral Kimmel could have done at that time was to do exactly what he did do, which is remain in port. But had he had that last-minute warning, he could have set general quarters, which would have reduced the damage. But there was nothing else that was even possible. His aircraft carriers were not available to them. They were off on other tasks. He had no air support. To have tried to sortie from harbor, which he might felt he was impelled to do in defense of the islands of the Hawaiian Islands. Had he sortied, his ships would have been sunk in deep water. He did exactly right.
Help right a wrong, end 70 years of injustice. Urge the President to act now and restore the ranks of Admiral Kimmel and General Short.